Thousands of people have mysteriously vanished in America's wilderness. Under strange and unexplainable circumstances. Most cases remain unsolved. What happened? Where did they go? Locations unknown.
Thousands of people have mysteriously vanished in America's wilderness. Join us as we dive into the deep end of the unexplainable and try to piece together what happened. You are listening to Locations Unknown.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Locations Unknown. I am your solo host once again, Mike Van Bogert. Joe is out with the flu this week, so I am manning the ship once again on my own. Before we get going here, just a couple of announcements. So, as you all know, we've got a big live stream coming up on April 23rd. It's going to start around 6:30 Central Time now, PM. And we've got a lot of cool guests lined up. So the hosts from National Park After Dark will be joining us. Evan Stone, the extreme filmmaker we've had on the show a couple times, will be joining us. The hosts from Crime Off the Grid will be joining us. They're retired law enforcement park rangers, so I'm sure they've got a lot of cool stories. We'll also have some of our other network shows on. We're going to have a live members-only video call with all of our supporters, which will be viewable to everyone, but you need to be a member to join that. And we hopefully have a couple other surprises for the live stream. So make sure to check out all of our social media pages for more details on that. And it's going to be a multi-hour live stream. We're probably going to go pretty late into the evening, so make sure to tune into that. We'll be posting the link to the live stream here in the next couple of days. So check that out. If you want to call the show or text the show, you can call 208-391-6913. You could also check out some of the other cool shows we have on the network. So we got Peanut Butter and Mountain Podcast, Off the Trails, The Weirdos We Know, Who Runs This Park, and Crime Off the Grid. If you want to support the show, you can head on over to Patreon and subscribe to our Patreon account. There's lots of additional content there that you can only get on Patreon or YouTube memberships or premium subscriptions on Apple or premium subscriptions on Spreaker. Outside of that, don't really have any updates. We're hoping the best for Joe. I spoke with him earlier today, and he's pretty sick, so no way he could have made it in tonight. So, all right, everybody, let's gear up and get out to explore Locations Unknown. In October 2012, an experienced hiker vanished amid an early season snowstorm near California's remote Taboose Pass. Despite extensive search efforts hindered by brutal terrain, freezing temperatures, and blinding whiteouts, rescuers found no trace. Months later, melting snow exposed startling clues, raising even deeper questions about what truly occurred near the Alpine summit. With clear evidence of a frantic emergency call and an abandoned tent, the mystery deepens. Was it hypothermia, altitude sickness, or something more sinister? Join us this week as we explore the disappearance of Larry Conn in Kings Canyon National Park. So we are headed headed to Kings Canyon National Park this week. Another park I have not been to yet, hoping to hike it someday. So this park is about 722 square miles. If you want to think about that in the larger scheme of all the parks, it's the 22nd largest park by land area. The sublocation I'm going to be talking about mostly tonight is the remote high country on the eastern Sierra Crest near Taboose Pass. It's an elevation of about 11,400 feet, and we're going to be along the Taboose Pass Trail that connects to the Inyo National Forest, to the John Muir Trail. So this is in the state of California. It was originally established as General Grant National Park on October 1st of 1890. Then the park was greatly expanded and renamed Kings Canyon National Park on March 4th of 1940. Park sees about 699,000 visitors a year. This was in 2024, so this would be 34th out of the 63 parks. So not one of the most popular parks in the park system, but all the pictures I've seen, it looks really cool. Going to get into a little bit of the climate here. So the stretch of the Taboose Pass Trail where Larry went missing is, like I said, at 11,400 feet or 3,480 meters for our foreign listeners on the crest of the Sierra Nevada. And at this elevation, the climate is a true alpine environment. So no month of the year has a mean temperature of above 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius, and average highs in the brief summer seldom exceed 59 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius. Nights, even in July and August, often drop below freezing, and temperatures can swing 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit between day and night due to the thin, dry air at altitude. Precipitation falls mostly as snow, as you can imagine, from late autumn through spring. Early season storms, like the one in October that impacted Larry, can deposit a foot or more in a single event, and snowpack may linger into July above 10,000 feet. Summer precipitation is minimal through afternoon, though afternoon thunderstorms are not uncommon. Winter is typically from late September to May, with sub-freezing daytime highs, prolonged snow cover, and frequent high windstorms. Summer, typically June to September, is cool, sunny days, usually 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, freezing nights, and rapid weather changes. So we're talking thunderstorms, fog. The shoulder seasons, spring and fall, highly variable. Warm spells can be followed by sudden snow or sub-freezing nights. Getting into a little bit of the terrain here. So this stretch where Larry went missing features dramatically varied high alpine terrain. The trail begins at Owens Valley Desert Floor in black lava rock and sagebush, then follows Taboose Creek up a steep, narrow canyon flanked by towering granite walls. You'll cross small cascades and two creek fords, then switch back relentlessly as you gain over 4,000 feet in under 6 miles. So pretty brutal trail. You better be in good shape if you're going to do it. You then have subalpine forest band, which is about 9,000 feet to 10,500 feet. Above the Creek Canyon, sparse stands of whitebark pine and limber pine thin out, giving way to crummels. Stunted, wind-gnarled trees hugging rocky slopes. Talus fields litter the trail, requiring careful footing. And if anyone's ever hiked on talus, you can twist an ankle pretty easily if you're not paying attention. Then finally, you have the Alpine Pass Summit, which is around 11,400 feet. So crossing the Taboose Pass deposits you on a boulder-strewn plateau etched with glacial striations in the granite. Vegetation is minimal, low alpine grasses and wildflowers in protected pockets, but the ground is mostly loose scree and exposed slabs. The pass itself is a wide, windswept saddle offering only scarce shelter, somewhere you do not want to be caught in a storm. Then on the west side, we've got the High Country Basin. So this is descending into Kings Canyon National Park. You enter an open area of Tarn-fed meadows with lakes such as Bench and Marjorie Lake tucked beneath 13,000-foot peaks. The terrain alternates between talus slopes, rocky ridges, and grassy campsites, but remains steep and unforgiving. Trail grades often exceed 15 or 20%, which is a pretty gnarly slope, especially if you've got a big backpack on your back. Whenever I'm hiking, I always feel like you always think going downhill is going to be easier than going up, but going downhill really puts a number on your knees and your toes. At least that's what I've found. Some of the dangers present in this area where he was hiking. So animals, up at this altitude, you're actually not going to have a ton of animals that you're going to be contending with. You are going to have black bears and mule deer. They do frequent the 9,000 to 10,500 foot zone just below the pass, but they are seldom above the tree line. And why would they? They want to stay where the food is. You do have some reptiles, but virtually none at the elevation of the pass. Most snake and lizard species occur well below 10,000 feet. You will find Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep, which are an endangered species. And there's some white-tailed jackrabbits and yellow-bellied marmots. Some of the other dangers Larry would have faced, or anyone listening if they decide to hike this route, are going to face. One of the biggest ones is going to be hypothermia and exposure. Even experienced hikers can succumb to hypothermia when wet. Cold winds and rapidly dropping temperatures overwhelm your body's ability to stay warm. And above 10,000 feet, a single rain-turned snow event can zap the heat right out of you in minutes, especially if your layers become soaked. And I've personally experienced this hiking Mount Rainier. And I had all of the rain gear, and I thought I was good to go, and we experienced sideways rain for an entire night and actually had to call the trip off due to hypothermia scares, and it's not worth risking your life. And the rain went right through all of my cold, rain gear, cold gear, and I had spare clothes and dry sacks, and as soon as you open those up to change, they're soaked too. So you can get cold and wet very quickly. Another issue you're going to face is acute mountain sickness. So above 8,000 feet, reduced oxygen can trigger headaches, nausea, dizziness, and fatigue, symptoms that impair judgment and physical performance. Rapid ascent without adequate acclimatization raises the risk of AMS, HACE, H-A-C-E, or even life-threatening pulmonary edema. So Joe and I have both experienced this in hiking parties. One of my buddies, when we were hiking to the summit of Mauna Loa in Hawaii, got really bad altitude sickness, and Joe was hiking with a guy in Colorado who got almost delirious and was trying to head back down to their car, which was probably a several-day hike away. So very dangerous, and it can set in quickly. Another danger you're going to face in this area is avalanche and slab slide risks. So early season storms deposit unstable snow layers over old, harder snow or rock. Wind-drifted slabs on leeward slopes, like those above Taboose Creek, can release even under a hiker's weight. Avalanches in steep colliers and wind-loaded gullies are a known threat in the October to November transition. Another danger you're going to have is rockfall and loose talus. So the freeze and thaw cycles really loosen boulders and scree fields, creating constant rockfall danger on the slopes and under cliffs. A single dislodged stone can trigger a cascade of debris down into a hiker's route. And if you've ever seen some of these videos on YouTube, they're absolutely wild. There's one I saw that happened, I think, on Mount Everest. And it starts with just, you see a couple boulders or a couple pebbles rolling down, and then it turns into people dodging massive boulders coming down the mountain. So it can be very dangerous. Another danger in the area is treacherous creek crossings. So Taboose Creek and its tributaries can swell dramatically in spring melt or during sudden thaws, turning small crossings into swift, waist-deep torrents that can sweep a person downstream. And it does not take a lot of water to overpower you. Just even enough water up to your knees can be more than you're going to be able to handle. So make sure to be cautious when crossing any streams or rivers. Another issue he would have faced is poor visibility and navigation errors. So blowing snow, fog, and pre-dawn darkness in a glacial basin with few landmarks can cause whiteouts, masking the trail, confusing orientation, and leading to cliff edge or cornice accidents. So you got to be real careful and try to just not, in general, try to not hike in those conditions would be the optimal thing to do. So another risk you're going to have is lightning and sudden storms, though this would have been less common in October. Afternoon thunder squalls can develop rapidly, bringing lightning strikes, hail, and heavy rain. Exposed ridges and pass saddles offer no protection, turning a simple crossing into a deadly lightning rod. That is the one thing you don't want to do, is get stuck on the top of a mountain or above the tree line in a thunderstorm. You are now the tallest point to the clouds. So finally, you're going to have altitude-related exhaustion and dehydration. So anyone that's hiked in high altitude environments know the thin air saps endurance. Even moderate exertion produces disproportionate fatigue and fluid loss. Dehydration reduces circulation and heat retention, compounding the hypothermia risk. Another thing I've always found too, hiking in mountainous environments, is I'm never hungry. I don't know. If you're listening, let me know in the comments if you've experienced that too. I've had hikes where we've hiked all day and you would normally be just ravenous, and it's night and we're, getting our tents out and not hungry. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but whenever I'm hiking in alpine environments, I'm never hungry. So maybe a good weight loss tip, just hike a lot in the mountains. So, quickly before I get into character profile, I'm just gonna go over the difficulty in general of the route Larry took. This is a pretty gnarly trail that he was on. So the route Larry took over to Taboose Pass is universally rated as strenuous to extra difficult, which would challenge even the most seasoned Sierra backpackers. So from the Taboose Creek trailhead, which is about 5,500 feet, up to the pass, 11,400 feet, is roughly 8 to 9 miles one way and climbs 6,000 feet. So that is some demanding trail that you're going to have to hike. There's lots of steep switchbacks through narrow granite-walled canyons, gaining 4,000 feet in the first 6 miles. Then you've got talus and scree fields above 9,000 feet, which we already talked about, requires very careful footing. You're going to have very minimal vegetation and few reliable water sources above the creek crossings. And then once you get up to the saddle, you're going to be completely exposed with no natural shelter. So that's somewhere you really don't want to be crossing in any kind of storm. All Trails rates this as extra difficult, and high altitude effects, like we talked about, the altitude sickness can start around 8,000 feet. So this trail that Larry took really requires good navigational skills. The trail is often going to be obscured by snow and drifted talus. Like I said earlier, snow can remain in the higher elevations into July. So there's a good chance if you're hiking this, the trail at some point is going to be completely obscured by snow. So you really need to check the maps and make sure you've got this all mapped out ahead of time so you're not going off trail and getting lost. Most parties do try to tackle the route he took in a 1 to 2 day backpack camping at one of the 4 primitive sites on the ascent. And you want to start early, right at dawn, is essential to avoid the afternoon thunderstorms and ensure daylight for the steep climb. So in short, this Taboose Pass is among one of the tougher eastern Sierra crossings. It's long, relentlessly steep, high in altitude, and highly exposed. And this is well beyond a moderate or casual day hike. This is something that you should be experienced in this kind of hiking and really plan out your hike so you don't end up lost. All right, let's jump right into character profile. So tonight's character, his name was Lawrence, but he went by Larry Conn. His date of birth was approximately 1959 based on his age. He went missing on October 19th of 2012, his remains were found. Give me 1 second here. I think I got something wrong. So his remains were found. We'll get into when they were found. In 1 second here. I want to make sure I have the date right. Okay. His remains were found in June of 2013. The person who did my notes, which was me, wrote 2023. So, remains were found on June 2013. He was a male, age 53. He was 5'10", weighed 160 pounds. He had short black hair with some grain. Don't know his eye color. Other features, he did have a mustache and goatee beard. Clothing and gear he was last seen in, so he had dark clothing, possibly a red or yellow bandana, dark gray or blue backpack. He had a tan red dome tent. He did have 5 days of food with him and water, warm clothing, tent, and he had an iPhone, which very important key there is had that iPhone that he had with him will provide some evidence of where he was during his hike. Personality, he was very methodical and well-prepared. He demonstrated careful planning and self-sufficiency as an experienced backpacker. Experience in the wilderness. He's a seasoned Sierra Nevada hiker, very familiar with multi-day high-elevation trips and prepared for winter conditions. And experienced at this location, so he planned the Taboose Pass to John Muir Trail route, indicating at least some prior familiarity with the southern Sierra Nevada terrain, though we're not sure exactly if he had done this route before, but from everything I read, he was a very seasoned hiker, backpacker, and he's done a lot of this in elevation, so a person that you would expect to be able to handle a hike like this. Jumping right into timeline, so our timeline starts October 19th of 2012. This is a Friday. Larry embarked on his backpacking trip via the Taboose Pass Trail. An outbound hiker crossing the pass saw him on this day, which was the last known sighting of him. So we have additional information. Like I said, he was carrying an iPhone, and later in the search, they actually ended up finding the iPhone and were able to still get it to work and got a GPS log of locations that he was at. So we do know where he was for some of this. So he left the Taboose Creek trailhead and gained roughly 6,000 feet over the day to camp at about 9,600 feet on the eastern approach to the pass. Like I said, this was per his GPS log in the phone. Weather on the 19th was seasonably mild for this altitude, but a significant change was forecasted. Larry had set up camp in the high country as he began the ascent towards the pass, which, like I said, rises to 11,400 feet. On October 20th of 2012, which is a Saturday, this is when the major storm hit. And I am kind of shocked that someone of his experience would have picked to do this type of hike, knowing that there was a chance for a major winter storm to move through the area. I would personally, if I saw the forecast, I would say, well, let's try it again next week. I'm not hiking in that. So this kind of shocked me that he would have attempted something this difficult with that type of storm on the horizon, but he did. So a strong early season winter storm struck the Sierra Nevada on the night of October 20th. By Sunday morning, up to 12 inches of snow had been deposited in the high elevations on Larry's route. So on this day, he had descended slightly to one of the lakes, which was at 11,598 feet. He spent the night there. That evening, the winter storm swept in, dropping up to a foot of snow, like I said. So not only did this storm bring a ton of snow, but it brought high winds and plummeting temperatures, creating hazardous conditions. It is believed that Larry was caught in this storm while in the backcountry. And we do know this now because of his cell phone GPS log. And this was Saturday again, so October 20th, the night of October 20th. So to recap, he started hiking from the Taboose Creek trailhead. He went up 6,000 feet, camped at 9,600 feet on the eastern approach to the pass. And that was the Friday night, so the 19th. And then on the 20th, which was a Saturday, the winter storm rolled in that night. He was camping, like I said, at a lake around 11,598, and this would be west of Split Mountain. It's now Sunday, October 21st of 2012. In the storm's aftermath, the high wilderness was blanketed in deep snow. Daytime weather began to clear, but snow cover persisted and nighttime temperatures fell well below freezing. Given these conditions, travel would have been extremely difficult. You're going to have lots of snow drifts. All the trail markers are going to be covered. But because of the GPS logs, we do kind of know what Larry did. So in clear weather overnight, Larry climbed the north slope route towards Split Mountain. Though he never summited, and there were no records of a registry entry and no photos on his phone. He then descended to Marjorie Lake on the John Muir Trail and camped there. That's the fact that he did all this with that kind of snow on the ground is pretty impressive. And he was also scheduled to exit the wilderness the next day, but it's possible at some point he became immobilized or lost. So it's now October 22nd, 2012, which is a Monday. This would have been the day he was scheduled to return. And he was supposed to hike out and drive home. Clear weather likely prevailed on Monday, but temperatures remained cold. The highs only a few degrees above freezing at 10 to 12,000 feet, and obviously very cold nights. So we do know during this time, during the intermittent snow, his phone logged him traveling from Marjorie Lake up to the John Muir Trail to Bench Lake Junction, then climbing 3 more miles to the southern end of the pass, arriving around noon. We also know at this point, emergency calls were attempted on his iPhone near the pass, indicating there must have been sub-signal availability even as visibility fell to 50 to 75 feet in blowing snow. Obviously, Larry did not return to the Taboose Creek trailhead as planned. Family and friends grew concerned when he failed to show up. By Monday night, there was still no sign of him, but it was possible he had been delayed by the storm. No report had been filed yet at this time, as a one-day delay in such conditions might not be entirely unexpected. It's now October 23rd of 2012. This is Tuesday. This is when the overdue hiker report was filed. So when Larry still had not appeared or communicated by Tuesday, he was officially reported as overdue to the authorities. On the evening of October 23rd, Larry's family contacted the Inyo County Sheriff's Department to report him missing. Deputies confirmed that his vehicle was still parked at the trailhead, indicating he had not come out of the wilderness. At this point, with a major storm having impacted the area and Larry overdue by more than a day, a search and rescue operation was initiated. So it's now October 24th of 2012. This is a Wednesday. This is when the search and rescue operation really kicked off. So early on October 24th, Inyo County authorities notified the National Park Service that a hiker was missing in Kings Canyon backcountry. A coordinated search effort began that day in Kings Canyon National Park, focusing on Larry's probable route from Taboose Creek towards the John Muir Trail. Approximately 12 personnel from Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks and Inyo County Sheriff's Office were deployed, supported by 2 helicopters. Search efforts on the 24th were hampered by the previous day's snow and ongoing high winds, which limited visibility from the air and made travel on foot treacherous. Despite the challenging conditions, rescuers managed to search likely areas near the trail and pass, but no sign of Larry was found on this day. It's now October 25th of 2012, a Thursday. The search and rescue mission really intensified by this point. So the search operation ramped up with additional resources. A total of about 20 personnel from the National Park Service and Inyo County Sheriff's Department were now involved in the search. 3 helicopters were utilized, including one equipped with thermal imaging to scan for heat signatures at night. Ground teams and air crews continued to cover the routes around Taboose Pass and along the John Muir Trail corridor. The search area was blanketed by 1 to 1.5 feet of snow, which made locating tracks or campsites difficult. And talk about a really tough search for the search and rescue teams. You've got, almost 2 feet of snow on the ground. That is going to cover up pretty much any evidence of anyone hiking out there. So just some really difficult conditions. And I can't say it enough when we talk about these cases. I got to give so much props to the search and rescue teams who go out there and do this, case after case. They don't know these people. They probably never will know them, and they don't care. They risk their own lives to go out there and search for them. So really got to give them a pat on the back for what they're doing. It's truly amazing that there's people out there that will do this. So daytime high temperatures were only in the mid-30s, and nights dropped into low 20s. So if Larry was still alive, he faced incredibly harsh exposure conditions. And unfortunately, no clues were discovered on this day, but rescuers remained hopeful as they expanded the search grid. It's now October 26th of 2012. It's a Friday. The search and rescue operation continued. The multi-agency search continued into Friday with similar force. Additional park rangers, volunteer search and rescue teams, and dog teams joined the effort as weather permitted. Snow remained on the ground, although sunny periods during the day began melting some snow at lower elevations. Crews probably revisited high probability spots and began widening the search beyond Larry's intended route in case he had detoured or attempted to descend a different way. By the end of October 26th, there were still no significant leads or evidence of where Larry was. It's now October 27th of 2012. This is a Saturday, so going into the weekend, the search effort reached one of its peak levels. On the 27th, over 3 dozen searchers, so 40-plus people, were in the field combing the rugged terrain. The team now included 13 specialized ground search teams and 3 search dogs drawn from multiple SAR organizations. So we've got Sequoia, Kings Canyon, Kern County, Sierra Madre, Yosemite, and the volunteer Yo-Dogs canine team. So a lot of people out there. They also had 2 contract helicopters. They also had 2 contract helicopters who were also deployed, an A-Star B3 and a Bell 206L4 to ferry teams in search from above. Efforts on this day focused on high probability areas along Larry's likely route, around the Taboose Pass, the basins, and travel corridors near a pass to the south, and the slopes of Split Mountain to the north. These areas included likely camping spots or routes Larry might have taken, but despite intensive searching of these zones, including aerial observation and dog tracking, no clues, so no footprints, discarded gear, or camp remains were found on the 27th. The accumulated snow, which was estimated at 18 inches on the ground at higher elevations, continued to complicate the search. It's now October 28th, which is a Sunday. Search operations continued through Sunday as teams revisited difficult terrain and widened their perimeter. Searchers were scheduled to return to the high country again on Sunday for further efforts. By this time, the search had been ongoing for 4 full days, so it started October 24th with no results. No new clues had turned up since the search began on Wednesday. The lack of evidence, so no footprints, campfire smoke, no gear, was disheartening to the crew. However, weather conditions were slowly improving. Daytime temperatures rose into the 40s as the sun melted snow, but at night it was still incredibly cold, low 20s. And the melt and refreeze cycle started to create crusty ice surfaces on the snow, further masking tracks that might have been initially left. SAR teams carefully probed areas of deeper snow and searched beneath trees and sheltering boulders in case Larry had hunkered down. By Sunday night, managers began considering how long to continue the intensive search if no evidence was found. So sadly, this comes up in every search we've covered. There's a point in the search where you have to be realistic about the expenditure of resources. So not only money, but, people and, the canine teams. At some point, if you don't find any evidence, you can't just keep everyone out there. The longer people are out there looking for them, especially in really rugged terrain like this, you're risking injury to the searchers or, the canine units. So sadly, the managers have to at some point make the call, and it's a tough one because the searchers want to, they want to come home either finding him alive or his remains to give the family closure. And it is very disheartening when they give it their all and days go by and not even a piece of gear is found or tracks or a scent or anything. So I feel their angst when, every case we cover, when we talk about the search getting called off, I feel it because I can just imagine what they're thinking. It's now October 29th, 2012. It's a Monday. So the search operation was still in full force at this time with about 45 personnel deployed in the field. 13 ground teams fanned out over the search zone, accompanied by 3 canine teams. The focus remained around Taboose Pass and Split Mountain, including likely travel routes and potential camp locations. 2 helicopters continued to provide air support and inserted teams into remote areas. However, conditions did remain challenging. Snow was melting during the day and then refreezing at night. This created a lot of icy patches and snow was drifting. So you had a lot of deeply sheltered areas. Daytime highs were reaching the mid 40s, which isn't bad, but at night they were still going below, low 20s. The high elevations, so 8,000 to 13,000 feet in the search zone, made physical exertion difficult for ground searchers. In fact, over the course of the search, 2 rescuers had to be evacuated by helicopter due to medical concerns related to the harsh environmental conditions. So we're talking altitude and cold exposure. Just like I talked about, the longer you're keeping searchers in these environments, the more you risk injury to your search team. So unfortunately, Monday's extensive search efforts again yielded no trace of Larry. By the end of October 29th, incident commanders had to evaluate how to proceed given the lack of results. Plans were made to continue searching into Tuesday, while also preparing to scale back operations if no clues emerged. It's now October 30th, 2012. The search entered its 7th day. By now, all high probabilities areas had been scoured multiple times with no success. Ground teams likely revisited sections of the John Muir Trail and drainages on either side of the pass, while helicopters performed one more overflight looking for anything unusual against the snow-covered landscape. Weather remained cold but mostly clear, with daylight hours shrinking and rescuers facing fatigue and persistent dangerous conditions. Officials started making the difficult decision to suspend the large-scale search. By Tuesday evening, no evidence of Larry had been found, and the operation had reached the point of diminishing returns. It's now October 31st of 2012. The intensive search effort in Kings Canyon was carried through October 31st, marking 8 days of continuous operation since the rescue was launched. By this point, approximately 56 personnel from multiple agencies had participated. They deployed on foot, by helicopter, and they had canine teams. The search had covered a vast area of about 48 square miles of rugged terrain, ranging from about 8,000 feet to 14,000 feet in elevation. That is just mind-blowing. 48 square miles in this kind of terrain. Props to the search and rescue team. Despite this exhaustive effort, not a single clue or item was linked to Larry. On the evening of October 31st, the incident management team, in consultation with the state search and rescue coordinator, decided to suspend major search operations. The combination of 0 results, worsening winter conditions, and growing risk to the searchers led to the decision. Incident Commander Dave Fox praised the massive interagency effort and noted the challenging search conditions, stating that we have followed up on all potential clues, but there is little information left to direct search operations. He emphasized that the MPS and partner agencies would remain alert for any new information and would resume active searching if credible leads surfaced. So, unfortunately, on November 1st of 2012, which is a Thursday, the search was suspended. On November 1st, park officials publicly announced that the active search for Larry had been suspended after an intensive 8-day effort. A press release summarized operations. So, October 24th to October 31st, dozens of personnel, at times up to 50 or 60 people, had scoured the area using 10 ground teams, 3 dog teams, and 5 helicopters in total. Rescuers had endured severe conditions, more than a foot of snow, nights as cold as 15 degrees Fahrenheit, high winds, and dangerous terrain. The search found no trace of Larry. The NPS statement echoed Dave Fox's comments that any new clues would prompt renewed efforts, but unfortunately, none were immediately forthcoming. Family and friends were notified of the search suspension, facing the grim uncertainty about Larry's fate. The case remained open as a missing persons investigation pending future discoveries. It's now November 17th, 2012. Several weeks later, with winter setting in, officials continued limited efforts to locate Larry. The National Park Service reissued a missing hiker flyer and update about Larry around mid-November. Kings Canyon spokesperson Dana Dirks highlighted the extreme difficulties the search teams had faced. There have been 2 or 3 snowstorms in the high Sierras, which makes it a very difficult place to search, she explained, noting that the short daylight hours and snow cover meant any remaining clues could be buried and hard to find. The park urged anyone with information on Larry's whereabouts to contact authorities, keeping the search for answers alive even as heavy snows would soon blanket the area for the winter. No substantive leads came in during the subsequent months. So, winter went by, spring went by, nothing new, no new leads, no evidence, and then all of a sudden in early to mid-June, they made a big discovery in the area, and sadly, obviously it's no secret, but his remains were found near the Taboose Pass. So 8 months after Larry's disappearance, a breakthrough occurred the following summer. As the snow melted in the high country, Larry's personal belongings were discovered in the remote Taboose Pass area of Kings Canyon, alongside human remains. An off-duty trail crew, as some news sources actually say it was hikers, located one of Larry's boots near the pass. A few days later, a tattered dome tent plus backpack clothing and other items turned up off the trail at 11,400 feet. Near a park boundary sign, small bones and teeth were found alongside Larry's cell phone. And the iPhone would go on to confirm his identity by its metadata and corroborated his campsites and final movements, like I said earlier. The items were identified as belonging to Larry, strongly indicating that the remains were his. The discovery near the pass effectively solved the mystery of what happened, but it didn't really, it solved the mystery of where his remains were, but I don't think it really solved the mystery of actually what happened to Larry. We'll go into my theory of what happened at the end. So the Inyo County Coroner's Office was called in to recover and identify the remains. News reports at the time noted that the find was made by, like I said, off-trail crew members hiking in the area. The location of the remains suggested that Larry had succumbed in the vicinity of the pass, likely due to exposure or an accident during the fierce storm. While specific details of his death were not released, the recovery of his body brought closure to the search. Officials noted that the rugged terrain and winter weather had severely hindered earlier search efforts, as evidenced by how close Larry's remains were to his route, yet remained undetected under the snow. So that goes back to how bad the conditions were during the search, that when you have 1.5 to 2 feet of snow on the ground, it's going to be nearly impossible to find anything. With the coroner's confirmation, the multi-agency search operation that began on October 2012 officially concluded in mid-2013, providing some answers to Conn's family and the search teams who had really given it their all to find him. So, getting into likely theories of what they think happened to Larry, the biggest theory, and the one I think holds the most water, is hypothermia due to the severe weather. So, like I said, we had a sudden storm impact the area on October 20th, 2012. It brought up to 12 inches of snow and temperatures dropped down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Conditions like that are going to, I don't care how well prepared you are, that can lead to hypothermia pretty quick, especially if you're wet or fatigued or unable to find any shelter, which if you're up on that pass, shelter is going to be tough. So the leading theory is he had some kind of, he was suffering from hypothermia. Coupled with hypothermia, he could have had navigation challenges. So the storm most likely caused whiteout conditions, basically reducing visibility to pretty much as far as you can stretch your arm. And this can cause even the most experienced hikers to become lost. And he may have lost his bearings, led him off trail into more hazardous terrain, and it would have complicated his situation even further. And coupled with, hypothermia, being lost, he could have been suffering from altitude-related sickness. So this passes at about 11,400 feet. You definitely can get altitude sickness at that elevation, and it can impair judgment and physical ability. So I know he was a very experienced alpine backcountry hiker, but even the best of us can suffer from altitude sickness if you're up there long enough. Another theory, he could have suffered some kind of accident due to terrain hazards. So the area around this pass is characterized by steep rocky terrain with loose scree talus fields. It would not be a stretch to conclude he might have fallen, or was in a rock slide, or something happened that prevented him from seeking further shelter or signaling for help. Less likely is probably a wildlife encounter. I did say there were bears up there, but they're not going to be above the tree line, and black bears are going to be less of a concern than if you're hiking somewhere with grizzlies. So I'm not going to give wildlife encounter much airtime. I don't think that's what happened here. So what do I think happened to Larry? I think Larry, exhausted from climbing in deteriorating conditions, just imagine, he's gone up, he's hiking up trails where he's gaining 6,000 feet in elevation through really nasty switchbacks. And the next day he's hiking in a foot of snow. I mean, that drains even the most conditioned alpine hiker. That's really tough to hike in. So I think he was exhausted from his trip. He attempted shelter near the pass. Hypothermia quickly set in due to the cold temperatures. exposure, damp clothing. He got disorientated by, the worsening conditions. His mental state probably declined rapidly, and eventually he became potentially incapacitated in or near his tent. And sadly, he probably likely passed away shortly thereafter. And then his remains might have been scattered later by animals or the seasonal weather. And what really I feel like backs up this theory is the following. So he had the sudden severe weather come in quick. And, unexpected winter storm hits between October 20th and 22nd, and it deposits up to a foot of snow. At this altitude, it would have rapidly caused severe cold stress, especially without the ability to create any warmth. So no fires, no hot food. He also probably would have been disoriented. He had limited visibility, 50 to 75 feet at most, and it would have just been whiteout conditions. Can you imagine that much snow coming down? The wind is just howling. It would be really tough to see. And I think the attempts that we saw on his phone, emergency calls that he tried to make, probably indicate he knew at some point before it was too late that he needed help. Another thing I think that ties all this together is he probably was, like I said, exhausted and experiencing altitude sickness. So he gained a 6,000 feet of elevation gain, and that would sap the energy out of you. That would dehydrate you. That would reduce your body's ability to maintain warmth. I think all of this kind of factors into what happened to him. He also had limited supplies, so he had minimal food and did not carry equipment suitable for extended periods in severe cold. We're thinking a stove, extra fuel, extensive thermal insulation. One of the things you'd want to carry with you if you're going to spend extensive time up in an environment like that is something to warm you back up. So you would want a stove or some kind of device that's going to be able to keep you warm, and he didn't have that with him. So once you're cold and wet, there's no coming back from that. And finally, the position of the remains and items. Discovery of his belongings and bones scattered near the pass suggests he attempted to shelter in his tent, likely attempting to wait out the storm, and possibly ventured briefly outside before succumbing to exposure. And animal activity and subsequent winter storms might have dispersed remains from their original location. So sadly, I think there was a kind of a cascading things that caused, sadly, Larry to pass away. I think, the sudden severe storm, hypothermia exposure, he probably got lost. He probably was suffering from altitude sickness based on just the crazy hike he had to do to get up there. He had limited supplies and he had nothing to heat himself back up. So he probably got wet and cold, and he had no way to get warm again. So it's a sad situation. He seemed like a very experienced backcountry alpine hiker, which again goes back to, I'm still struggling to understand why. Weather forecasts are pretty accurate, going out a few days. So, there's a good chance he knew the potential for a bad winter storm coming in, which raises the question to me is, why would you continue your trip if you knew that storm was coming in? I would cancel my trip. I would come back another time when I knew I had a couple days of clear weather. Because I can tell you, I don't want to hike in something like this. It sounds this trail that he did sounds absolutely crazy in the best weather. Like, it sounds really cool. Maybe when I was younger I would have done it, but I can't imagine doing what he did in that kind of weather. That's just insane. It doesn't even sound fun. I like to go hiking because it's fun. So I don't know that I'd want to do this. But he did chose to go out there and hike this. And he made it, you could tell he was experienced because he did make it several days in these conditions, which are in terrible, terrible conditions. So end of the day, a really sad situation. I do feel, I'm glad that they were able to recover his remains. That does give his family closure. In a lot of these cases, the family's just left with a, never ending question of what happened to my loved one? Where did they go? And that's just an unsettling feeling, never knowing what happened. At least in this case, he sadly did pass away, but the family got closure and they were able to recover the remains. So in a way, I guess that's the silver lining of a really tragic case. So let me know what you think about this case. We haven't covered a lot of cases where remains are found, but this one, and this was interesting because his GPS was able to log some of the places that he went. So it was able to give people kind of an idea after the fact of what happened to him. So it's interesting. We don't always have that. And hey, an iPhone lasted out in alpine environments for 8 months and they were able to turn it back on. So that's pretty interesting too, that a piece of technology could survive up there like that as well. So interesting in that regard. So yeah, let me know what you think of the case. Remember to tune in on the 23rd. This will be our last normal episode before the live stream. So I really hope that everyone listening tunes in. It should be a really fun time. And we've got a lot of fun guests. Might have a couple surprises too coming along. We're still working a few things out with some other people. So stay tuned for more details. And as always, when you are enjoying the majesty of nature in our national park system, always remember to leave no trace. Thank you, and we will see you again next time.